Have you ever questioned why certain habits are so hard to break? Why, despite your best efforts, you return to them time and time again? The mystery we're unraveling today is the enigma of addiction. Addiction is more than a mere craving, it's a complex condition, often tagged as a brain disease. It's characterized by compulsive, sometimes uncontrollable substance use, despite the harmful consequences that follow. Imagine being on a roller coaster that only goes down, spiraling into a void with no end in sight. That's what addiction feels like, an endless cycle of need, fulfillment, and remorse, only to start all over again. But let's delve a little deeper. When we say substance, we're not just talking about drugs or alcohol. Addiction isn't restricted to these substances. It's an all-encompassing term that includes seemingly harmless habits like eating, working, and yes, even thinking. Take eating, for instance. Most of us find comfort in food. It's a universal source of joy and satisfaction. But when the act of eating becomes a compulsive need, when it's no longer about satiating hunger but filling an emotional void, that's when it turns into an addiction. Then there's work. We live in a world that applauds overwork, that regards exhaustion as a badge of honor. But when work begins to consume us, when it takes over our lives, affecting our health and relationships, it's no longer just dedication or commitment, it's an addiction. And let's not forget thinking. Our minds are always buzzing, always filled with thoughts. But when these thoughts become incessant, when they begin to cause anxiety and distress, when we're unable to switch off, it's an addiction. So you see, addiction isn't just about the bad stuff. It's not just about the drugs or the alcohol. It's about anything that takes away our control, that makes us feel helpless and trapped. It's clear then that addiction is more than just a series of bad choices. It's a serious, often devastating, health concern. And it's time we started treating it as such. But what lures us into this cycle of addiction in the first place? To understand this, we must first understand the role of stimulation. Stimulation, in its most basic form, is a response. It's our body's way of reacting to an agent, an action, or a condition. Picture yourself biting into a ripe, juicy apple. That burst of sweetness you taste? That's your body reacting to the stimulation brought on by the apple. Or think about the last time you solved a tricky puzzle or a challenging problem. Remember that rush of satisfaction? That's your brain responding to the stimulation of problem solving. Now let's take a moment to appreciate the positive role of stimulation. It's not just about tasting sweet apples or feeling accomplished after solving a puzzle. It's about survival. From the moment we're born, we rely on stimulation to guide us through life. It helps us understand our surroundings, learn new skills, and even form relationships. It's a fundamental part of the human experience. Take, for instance, the stimulation we get from eating. It's not just about satisfying our hunger. It's about nourishing our bodies, supplying them with the energy they need to function. This stimulation is healthy and necessary for our survival. Similarly, the stimulation we experience from exercising is our body's way of telling us we're improving our health. Each bead of sweat, each strained muscle is a signal that we're making progress, that we're pushing our limits and strengthening our bodies. And let's not forget about mental stimulation. Whether it's from reading a book, solving a puzzle, or learning a new language, mental stimulation keeps our brains sharp and agile. It challenges us, pushes us to think critically and creatively. But here's the catch. Like all good things in life, there's a fine line between just enough and too much. And this is where the role of stimulation takes a darker turn. The quest for this feel-good stimulation can sometimes become relentless, obsessive. We crave more and more and more, until we cross that line into overstimulation. We overindulge, we overdo, we overstimulate. However, the quest for this feel-good stimulation can sometimes take an unhealthy turn, leading to overstimulation. Overstimulation, a state where we're receiving more information or stimuli than we can handle, can be a key player in the development of addiction. But how? Let's imagine a river, flowing gently and smoothly. This river represents the natural flow of dopamine, a neurotransmitter that acts as a feel-good messenger within our brain. It's the reward we get when we do something enjoyable, like eating a delicious meal or achieving a personal goal. Now, introduce a torrent of water into this serene river. This is overstimulation. It could be from consuming substances, engaging in certain behaviors, or even excessive use of technology. This surge of water or dopamine creates a powerful wave of pleasure, a high that sweeps through our brain. But what happens when the flood recedes? The riverbed or our brain is changed. It's been exposed to so much dopamine that it starts to adapt, to desensitize. Like a runner needing to increase their distance to feel the same exhilaration, our brain begins to crave more and more of this dopamine to reach the same level of pleasure. This can lead to a dangerous cycle. As the brain becomes increasingly desensitized, it demands more stimulation to achieve the same high. But each wave of pleasure comes at a cost. It alters the brain, making it harder and harder to experience joy from normal, everyday activities. The river, once calm and steady, now requires a flood to feel alive. And it's not just about substances or addictive behaviors. Overstimulation can be part of our daily lives. In our digital age, we are constantly bombarded with information, notifications, and entertainment. Each ping, each like, each share can send a mini wave of dopamine through our brains. So, how do we prevent this overexposure to stimulation from leading us down the path of addiction? It starts with awareness. Recognize the signs of overstimulation and understand its potential to lead to desensitization and addiction. And this is where impulsive behavior comes into play. Impulsive behavior, the tendency to do things without forethought or consideration of the consequences, is often the fuel that feeds the fire of addiction. Imagine a car, careening down a highway with no brakes. That's impulsive behavior. It's the driver who, despite knowing the risks, pushes the pedal to the metal, ignoring the speed limit signs. The adrenaline rush, the thrill of speed, all these sensations make the ride feel exhilarating. But what happens when there's a sudden turn in the road, or an unexpected obstacle appears? There's no time to react, no chance to slow down, and the result can be a disastrous crash. Now, let's translate this analogy to our lives. Impulsive behavior is like driving with no brakes. We engage in harmful behaviors or substances, get a rush, and ignore the potential consequences. We know they're there, but the thrill, the escape, or the brief relief these substances provide make us disregard the danger signs. But here's the catch. Our brain, being a complex and adaptable organ, starts to change. It begins to crave the rush, the thrill, and the relief. It starts to associate these feelings with the harmful behavior or substance. And just like that, we find ourselves in the grip of addiction. This is where impulsiveness and addiction become entwined in a dangerous dance. The more we engage in the harmful behavior or substance, the more our brain alters its response to stimulation. It demands more to achieve the same level of satisfaction, and thus, the cycle of addiction intensifies. We might think, I'll stop tomorrow or just one more time, but each time we give in to our impulses, we're reinforcing the cycle, making it harder to break free. It's like trying to stop the car on our highway. The faster we go, the harder it is to stop without crashing. So, how do we break this cycle? Breaking free from the cycle of addiction is no easy task, but understanding the role of stimulation, overstimulation, and impulsive behavior in addiction can provide us with the tools to combat it. An effective strategy to break the cycle of addiction is finding healthy alternatives for stimulation. Too often, individuals fall into the cycle of addiction in a quest for stimulation, an escape from boredom, or a means to cope with stress. Therefore, it's essential to identify activities that a similar sense of satisfaction, but without the harmful consequences. This could be anything from painting, reading, exercising, or even cooking. The key is to find something that you genuinely enjoy and helps you stay grounded. Alongside this, practicing mindfulness can be a powerful tool in curbing impulsive behavior, one of the leading contributors to addiction. Mindfulness teaches us to be present in the moment, to recognize our emotions, thoughts, and urges without acting on them impulsively. It's about acknowledging discomfort but not allowing it to control our actions. Although it might seem challenging at first, with practice, mindfulness becomes easier and can significantly aid in breaking the addiction cycle. It's important to remember that discomfort is a part of the process. Breaking free from addiction often means stepping out of your comfort zone and facing the discomfort head-on. It means acknowledging the problem, confronting the triggers, and dealing with the withdrawal symptoms. But remember, this discomfort is temporary, and with time, it will fade. Remember, the journey to overcoming addiction is a marathon, not a sprint. And with the right tools and mindset, you can conquer it.